Welcome back to Squawk Box this morning. Our next guests join us from Capitol Hill, where they are pushing new legislation that aims to establish a national data privacy standard. I want to bring in Senator Maria Cantwell of Washington State, chair of the Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation. Also, Congressman Kathy McMorris, Rodgers, also of Washington State. She is chair of the House Commerce Committee. I want to welcome both of you to the broadcast. Explain how this bill would work in practice.
Well, we're trying to establish, Andrew, a strong national standard for how you collect, use, and transfer people's most personal, sensitive information. We believe there should be a strong national federal standard on this. We are an entire country with internet commerce across the United States. We want the information age to continue to unfold, but we certainly want consumers to be protected on their most sensitive personal information from being used without their consent.
Why now? Not why now, but why do we think this has a better chance of passing now? We've been talking about privacy for over a decade now, and for all sorts of reasons, there has never been a bill that has gotten past the finish line.
Well, this is really an important legislation. I think that this is a moment when people in America understand how important it is that their privacy rights be protected online. This legislation is foundational to protecting Americans online, but also as we think about AI and the growing amount of data that businesses are going to be collecting in AI, these large data sets. This legislation is so important to protecting Americans online. Right now, we have a patchwork of state laws that have been passed. What we're doing, what Senator Cantwell and I have hammered out in this very strong privacy and data security bill, is a national standard that preempts state law in a way that is stronger than any state law, but is going to ensure that Americans' privacy rights are protected when they go online.
Chair Cantwell, let me ask you, we always say that the public feels very uncomfortable about their privacy being taken and their data being used in different ways. And yet I always am surprised that, we hear about a breach, some kind of terrible privacy breach at a company where a whole slew of data has come out. And yet we, the consumer, the public, goes back to that store or that website or that platform again and again and again. And I genuinely wonder, and you may think this is a crazy question, whether you believe that the public actually cares about this issue as much as we may very well talk about it.
Well, I know you're in Seattle, and so I know you're at the epicenter of all this. And I definitely talk to a lot of 20 and 30-year-olds who think, oh, yeah, this is the way it is, and this is the way we operate. But this is why we want this law, because we know this law particularly outlines what those who hold our data security requirements. So it also sets a national standard for how data security is supposed to operate in the United States of America. So no, we're not going to tolerate companies that hold big data and have a 25-year-old who basically just manages all that data and then forgets to do a patch when Microsoft or someone puts it out, like Equifax. And then all of a sudden, your data, we have one person who says that their data is being held by a telecom company. They haven't been a customer for 15 years, and yet their data is still being held. So this legislation also sets a national standard on how data security is supposed to work, and it's enforceable under this act to make sure that if consumers are greatly harmed, that they can take action against that harm.
Chair McMorris, Rodgers, to the extent that this is married at all or relates to TikTok, how does it work, and how do you think about TikTok in this context about data privacy?
The TikTok legislation that passed the House is separate from this bill. That is targeting apps that are controlled by foreign adversaries, TikTok and other apps. This legislation is separate. We've been working on this for months, actually years. Both the House and the Senate have been working on legislation, believing that it is important. And I'm really encouraged that Senator Cantwell and I have been able to hammer out language that will protect our data privacy online with a strong preemption, as well as enforcement when there is substantial harm, and protecting small businesses. We don't want to burden small businesses with regulations or with cost. We cherish American startups and small businesses, and I really believe that we've been able to hammer out a strong bill, and I believe that this is a bill that many see as a bill whose time has come.
Well, let me ask you specifically about small businesses, because one of the big issues around data privacy on the other side is you talk to both big tech companies with platforms, but also small businesses that are trying to reach individuals who say, you know what, some of these rules invariably make it much tougher for us to advertise, market, and touch our consumers. What do you say to them?
Well, Andrew, listen, I keep going back to Seattle because that's where you are. I'm a big hiker. So it's okay if they know, if REI knows that I like to hike, and they send me the specials and the great deals that I might get at REI. But it's up to the consumer here to say what information they want shared that's their most sensitive information, and if they're okay with them selling that to a third party. So we want to put the consumer a little more back in control about how their data is used. And since this is such a voluminous business, the advertising market here is bigger than any other advertising market that exists anywhere. In fact, I think it's caused some deleterious harm to the broadcast and the fourth estate as we know it, and their ability to continue to get us good information. So this basically says that the consumer has a little bit of right here about that most sensitive data, even when it involves the government. Right. Mm-hmm. That is that you cannot collect sensitive information about me and sell it online to anybody, including the government, without my consent.
Okay, but let me ask you this, talking about consent, and I'm sure you've experienced this, I've experienced, I think we all do, and you've seen this actually even come out of Europe. How many times have you been asked, do you consent to cookies being put on your web browser, or do you consent to this or that? And invariably, we just, like sheep, we click, we say yes, 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 because of course, if you say no, then the whole process ends. How do you get around that?
Well, this legislation also includes a provision that says you can't use nefarious ways to trick people or force them into accepting cookies. What we want is to make sure that the policies that companies have are clear and transparent, and that they tell you what they're doing with your data. Because what we're trying to stop is the voluminous amount of sale of that data, so that now I am profiled online, that my health habits or might be used against me on prejudice against insurance or a job or something that could be deleterious to me and causing harm. Right. And with AI exploding, we are concerned that people might use these tools to really create unbelievable things that would harm consumers.
Chair Cantwell and Chair McMorris, Rodgers, want to thank you both for joining us. We will, of course, follow the progress of this very bill, and we appreciate you joining us this morning.